Patty, Helgi, we are here to talk about Divertimento from Le Baiser de la Fée. And I will just say for some people who may not know French, for instance, it's The Fairy's Kiss is the translation. And it's a bit unusual in Balanchine's oeuvre because it is based on a specific story, which is quite unusual for him. It's derived several generations later, so it's not a concrete representation of this story, but it is about an artist who was fatally kissed by a fairy, which represented his brilliant talent, which kept him from a normal life. Stravinsky wrote the music based on all Tchaikovsky music, but he orchestrated and did his thing with it. And probably the most famous theme is None But the Lonely Heart. And there's joy, there's sadness, it's drama, it's pure dance, it's all kinds of things. And I just wondered how much of this backstory either of you knew before Balanchine began this work on you. The fairy, the fate, the burden of too much talent, or however you want to interpret it. Was this anywhere near part of the introduction to the ballet?
I knew he had done it several times before, and I knew it was a story ballet, and Tanny was in it.
You what?
I know Tanny Leclerc did.
Tanny, oh yeah.
Because she told me that she had the same arabesque penchée in it, but it was a real story. I think Nicholas Maglanis and maybe Maria Tolchi.
Tolchi was the fairy.
And so there was a big drama story, but I knew about it, but Mr. Balanchine didn't talk about it. That I knew it was done before.
Right.
But it was just pure dance.
This is almost a distillation of all of that background, but it does figure, and it does certainly figure in the music, with its fate, and as I say, with its joy, with its sadness, and so on and so forth. And so if you knew anything about that, did that color your ideas of the ballet?
Not really. I mean, for me, he didn't say anything other than when he called me in to make that variation, which was way after he had done the ballet. And he said, I found some extra music from when I had done it years ago, and it was about the storyteller. It's the mystique of a storyteller. And that's all he said to me. So then he started choreographing, that was it.
Well, that, frankly, I thought you might say something like that. Almost everyone, when asks, what did Balanchine say? And they almost always say, he didn't say anything. No. He showed, he demonstrated. Yes. With his gesture, he said everything, kind of business.
You know, this was done for the Stravinsky Festival in 1972. And for that, None But the Lonely Heart wasn't in it. He did that the season after. He wanted to add it. He probably had so much to do. You know, he had, violin concerto, symphony in 3 movements. He choreographed. He had so much on his plate to do all those masterpieces during that period. So
it's also
he
a
added
ballet
it.
that he changed several times. He obviously, we hear that he knew what he wanted and that's what you got. But in this particular ballet, over the years, he was obviously in some way dissatisfied with the many productions he did on the storyline, and then even with the Divertimento, he added stuff later. But I had no idea that the first thing you heard of it was your famous solo.
Yes, that's
the fairy
right. The
disguised
gypsy.
as a gypsy,
Gypsy
telling
queen, that's
the
right.
young man's fortune.
Yeah.
He is unaware that he has this dreadful fate in front of him. In fact, it's supposed to be his wedding day or something like that. And the woman in the Divertimento is not the fairy, it's the fiancée from whom he parts. I mean, if you want to put a name to it, characters don't really have names, but if there's if there's any character in it, because there's no direct story. But
Well, that makes sense then, the ending, how it ends, so.
Well, I mean,
sadly.
But, he never said anything, Balanchine really, I don't even mean speaking, in movement directly. It was all implication, it seems to me.
And he showed so beautifully.
Well, I know.
And the musicality.
I think, yes, I mean, let's talk about the music a little bit, because as he says, everything comes from the music, or his inspiration comes from the music, and the music is so telling.
It's done on the music, and it looks so extraordinary if it's done right over the music, or it has a weight to it and a character. Some of the steps are a little Russian in flavor. It has this, the spirit and the character a little bit of the Russian, and but he always could show so extraordinarily well. You learn the music by. I love all the rhythms that he used in this. It's so evident what he did. It fits the music so beautifully, and it's always natural. Though there are many tricky partnering things that we had to work very hard on those
yes.
partnering things.
Well, when I joined the company, I had never danced to Stravinsky music ever before.
Oh my.
So the first thing was the Stravinsky Festival. Symphony in 3 Movements was the one. Actually, he had done this first. He choreographed this first.
Mm-hmm.
And the music was so foreign to me, but the way he demonstrated things and showed, it made such sense what he was doing to the music that I caught on right away. But Symphony in 3 Movements was not as easy as BAISER.
I imagine, yeah.
But it was challenging, and I had fun with it. So
It's definitely challenging. I remember years and years ago, Freddie Franklin, speaking to him, because he worked with Balanchine in the 40s, and mentioned how different his work then was from other ballets that he had danced. He was always a character, and he didn't have, there was not music like that. And he said, getting used to Balanchine and his musicality was something that you had to get used to. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just there, but on the other hand, all the dancers say that the choreography fits so well.
yeah. I remember with Symphony in 3 Movements, he had me in the first movement, and he gave me steps to do, and he choreographed it, and I did what he told me to do, and with the line of ladies, the court ladies, and within a few days, no, he wanted to change it. He was not happy with it, and he changed it 7 times.
Really?
Which was extremely unusual for Mr. Balanchine.
Right, I had
That
heard that about
was.
that particular
Yeah.
ballet. He couldn't.
And, I remember going to Rosemary and saying, maybe it's me, maybe I should not be in the ballet. He said, no, he keeps saying that he's not happy with what he gave me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And I think finally by the 7th version of it, he said, okay, that's it.
That's it, yeah.
That's very rare.
Very
That's so
rare.
rare, because
I mean,
usually he does it in a flash.
The first thing that he does is always what stays with him,
Well, but,
Jerry was different.
oh, I heard about it.
Yeah,
We know
but-
that
yeah.
Jerry was different.
But I was getting really nervous. I had just joined the company, and he kept changing things, and I said, oh, maybe
Yes.
it's just me.
Well, as I say, BAISER has a history of that too, for one reason or another. He was not always unsatisfied. I hope he was satisfied by the end, but
He did it very fast, though.
Yeah.
He just danced it, and I
well,
did
it's sort
it.
of
and-
almost like a conversation. You're
Yeah.
solo.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we worked, he used to teach us class
yes,
every
yes.
day, so you knew what he wanted,
Yeah.
and the energy, and all of that, and how he wanted us to use our heads, and so we just tried to help him
Realize.
because that was an extraordinary week of Stravinsky ballets.
Sure. But Helgi, you mentioned your solo, which is quite famous. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Well, my name was up on the call board with Mr. Balanchine. And so I went to Gordon Bolsner, the pianist, he was called, and I said, what is this about? Because the ballet had already been done by that time. And he said, I think Mr. B found some music. So when I came into the studio, Mr. B said sort of the same, I found some music, he said, and it had to do with the storyteller, the fortune teller, and so let's see what I can do.
And what did he do? Yeah.
And he says,
Wow.
start it, and I just start following him around and doing what he wanted me to do. No, don't do this that way, turn this way. And he was just nonstop, and I could barely keep up with him. And at one point he says, take a minute, think about it. And he went to talk to Gordon, and then he said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I have it all in my head."
Good for you.
And he said, "Well, let's see it." And he said, "Good." And he said, "You work on it." And that happened in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That solo, which is quite amazing.
Yeah.
And he didn't see it again until the day before we opened on the stage.
Well, we know from what people have told me, he trusted his dancers.
Yes.
And if he gave them, he knew they would work on it and probably improve it or refine it or make it presentational. And I mean, not everybody. Sometimes I gather he said, "No, I don't want it that way." But in particular, this variation is considered quite a milestone for many reasons. Your performance, of course, but because it was almost a new view of male dancing.
Yes.
Classical male dancing, as we know, traditionally, the classical male solo concentrates on beats, jumps,
Double
beats
tours.
and jumps and pirouettes,
Yeah.
and tours, yes.
Yeah.
And it's not that those aren't in yours in particular, but they're so intertwined with, and you might almost say embroidery, or I don't know what you call the épaulement, the nuance.
Yes.
And the whole tone seems to be very different from a big presentational solo, which is very often the climax of something
Yes,
or other.
exactly.
And as I say, you were obviously the perfect instrument to show this new, I don't know whether gentleness is the right word, or new subtlety, or new fineness. But I have the feeling, in a way, that it sort of introduced a new vision of the male, really.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I think it was like a whole different era. This is what male dancer can do.
Right.
I think that when I look back on it, how we choreographed for women was beautiful. How it was so intricate, and the point work and everything else. And I think this was, in my opinion, sort of the first time he ventured into that with a male dancer, to see what choreographically he could do, other than, like you say, the jumps and the
Bam,
double
bam,
two.
yeah.
And I think for him it was a different avenue to take than he had not taken before.
Yeah.
So.
And then it caught on, because we now have quite a few male dancers who are in that mold, shall we say, which I think is quite new. And you were the first, at least you were his first.
It's a beautiful solo.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Just
It's got
stunning.
everything in it, but it's very difficult, like all of his stuff.
It's difficult, and it gets gradually harder and harder as you go on.
Well, I've watched you teaching it at another time, and that, yes, you think, oh, well, I can do the first few steps.
Yeah.
And then there's some more steps. And then you get to the point where you're spotting 3 different ways in one jump, and various other things. And incredible torso movement, and those other things you gave, which was pirouette on a bent knee, on demi-point, I mean, all kinds of swirls.
And it wasn't the traditional way you do something in cabriole, and you stop and you go to the corner and you do a different.
Exactly.
This was just non-stop.
Yeah.
And the movements.
Inventive.
I know.
And,
Very special. It's a beautiful thing.
And of course, me, myself, it was so new to me. And I remember when I came home and Marlene said, "Well, how was it?" My wife, and I said, "I have no idea."
Sure.
Because I can't see myself.
Yeah.
But it was very, very different. But, it was absolute joy to work on it with him.
Sure.
That 1 hour and 20 minutes.
So when first you thought, well, maybe I shouldn't be in this ballet. I know that was a different ballet, but I'm sure once you got that solo and got a hold of it, you really enjoyed it, and it was a wonderful thing to do, and wonderful to watch.
It was a gift.
It was a
to
gift.
have a great gift.
Yeah.
And he was so
new.
wonderful.
I mean, you were new in the company.
Yeah.
What a way to start. But the woman's solo also, the male's is perhaps more famous because it's a little more of a departure, but the woman's solo also is delicate, and with loads of nuance, and of course, épaulement all over the place for both of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And torso movements and
Yeah.
so on. I mean, they really can, in a way, match each other in tone, I would say.
because it was like a little Russian, a hint of a little Russian character dance. You'd begin like and you use the head with the body working, and the musicality was special, and attack. And at one point he said, "Oh, just make up your arms here. Make up your arms. Do what you feel comfortable doing."
Casual.
But I tried to, because he had the spirit of that, and he loved the heaviness of the music down with like the character feel, and then it gets very perky, and it was so much fun to do, and sometimes it was so fast. The footwork was really quick. But it was over in a flash. It's very short, but the musicality was brilliant.
A lot in a very short time.
I loved it. I loved doing it.
The other thing, quality in the ballet, it seems to me, and this emanates from the music, is the kind of a spirituality, which he has in other works as well, such as, Unanswered Question or La Valse, or many unanswered questions in his ballets. He's not always at all explicit.
No.
It's there somewhere, but that's one of, he obviously a very spiritual person.
He was sort of searching a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he knew where it leads to, but he was still exploring.
It seems to me, yeah. Yes, I think so.
But it changes completely, the second part, None from the Lonely Heart. It changes the mood because it's very playful, and you're having fun.
And joyous.
And
then they're in love.
Yeah. And then the lights dim, and you get that powerful solo. And then I come on, and it's very bright. The finale is very happy. And then the mood changes. You feel so different, and there's a mood. The music makes a different mood.
There's a certain sadness.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It is very moving.
And the choreography also.
It touches your heart.
It's quite an amazing thing. And as I say, I think it derives from the story, but many removes. And of course, I don't think people always realize that the two, maybe they do realize, but I don't know that I did at first viewing, that the two don't touch that much in the second part of the pas de deux. And of course, they leave from separate sides. What kind of a romance is this when they wind up separating?
Yeah, that's right.
It's very thought-provoking, I would say.
And he just found it. I mean, we had the premiere, and we only added on a happy note. And then, da-da-dum, when that music starts, take my hand away from him, and then total move. And he had me moving my arms back.
I noticed that.
He kept saying, bring it, like in the opening, he'd have me arms back, and he was rather specific with what he wanted when he showed me how, you do this with your arm, and you use your head, and
some of those
he was
movements
very
are within an
different
inch
about
of
what he wanted.
Sometimes, as I gather from both of you, but you've told me, Patty, that sometimes he said, well, do arms. Kind of. And
a little tiny bit.
Yeah, no, I know.
But mostly he.
But this seemed to me much more, as I say, things were within an inch of each other. They had to be. They couldn't be an arm gesture. It had to be a particular spacing and so on.
Because he showed it all.
Oh, I'm sure.
We were all amazed to see him at work. Because he always was, he came out with such extraordinary things that he would come, and you were always like amazed, oh, he did that. And then he'd leave you, and you'd have to work things out.
You have to figure out what he had just done, right?
But he was such a great partner, too. He knew how a woman could be on point, all that. But it's wonderful to work with him and to be the first person that does it. And then years later, you see it have a life. And you see the future generations going into it. And that's wonderful also to see how, that was done in '72, and it's still challenging, and it still has a richness of steps and mood, and it gives you so much just to be able to do it, to do the ballet, and to do it with, it always looks different with the people who do it. After Helgi, I did it with many different, and it changes from the personalities. Like working with the dancers today was so wonderful, but physically they're very different than Helgi and I, physically. So, but it's a joy to be able to pass it on and to have it the way Mr. B said it, so that, but it has to be them. You don't want them to look like you. You want them to give them basically the musicality. And the counts make such a difference. The weight of the plie and how it works. Because we were so used to taking Mr. B's classes and working on other ballets that he choreographed. So we were so used to him. Like you came and you hadn't done, to go into this from coming from your
I'm
background.
different from you. I never counted anything.
You could hear it. You could hear it,
I
but
heard it.
I had to.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people say that.
Yeah, and
a lot of
if
people.
you asked me what the counts were for this, what we did today, I wouldn't even know.
But it's just when people, the next generation or the generation after that, has to teach it to somebody else.
Yes, I
they pretty
understand.
much have to
You
know
have to
counts.
be clear
So they're
in how
there,
it is
but
so they can
I
get
don't
it.
necessarily, especially the first interpreters, don't particularly. I know he told Elisa Barkova, we're going back a few centuries practically, listen to the music.
Well, he said that very often.
I know, to everybody. And there are counts in there somewhere, and there are different counts for the music, the musicians and for the dancers.
Exactly.
And there's, obviously, you have to,
The only time I remember of all my years there where Mr. B gave counts, just in case,
Yes.
was Symphony in 3 movements.
Uh-huh.
Dancers needed count because it was so complex.
Yeah.
But
Agon
other
too.
maybe
Agon.
maybe it did Agon, but that's the only time I experienced him ever giving counts. Otherwise, it was always just listen to the music.
But it's like you listen to his voice and he's with you. You're dancing, but you're listening to his voice inside of you. Because it's sort of ingrained in you the way he shows it to you.
Think how lucky we were.
You want to,
Think how lucky we are.
Oh, we were
to have
so
been
lucky.
there.
That's what we're trying to do, is to
Yeah, we tried to pass it
Sure.
over to the next
feel
one.
that they feel that.
Well, I'm sure you both have done quite a bit of that in your days.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I think this was
Very
quite
welcome.
wonderful. This is a little divertissement all on its own, and I'm thrilled that it's preserved and that your coaching is
Well,
is
thank you,
preserved.
Nancy. Thank you very
Nancy.
much.
Thank you.